Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Billy Dees, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you are here. If I have never had the honor before of having you as a listener, well, let me tell you that the podcast is primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. We interview a lot of creative types. We interview a lot of people who just have a story that is interesting, it's captivating, or maybe they have an attitude, a philosophy, if you will, about life in general, and they're just great people to hear from. In terms of our commentary, it depends. Usually, more of our in-depth commentaries, I like to do audio only, because I found that the spoken word to me is an art form. And dedicated audio, as it were, whether it be radio or audiobooks and so on, there is a certain strategy that you have with audio only. There's a different type of creativity involved. And I'd like to explore that every so often. We're going to do that today. Today, we are going to be asking the question, are some people born evil? Unfortunately, there seems to be no shortage of evil acts in this world, whether it be terrorism, domestic terrorism, these horrible mass shootings, violence in the streets, and probably the worst seem to be these acts of violence toward people. And it seems like the goal is to inflict harm. There's some sort of sadistic pleasure in making people afraid, making them feel pain, making them feel terrorized. There's no shortage. All you have to do is turn on the news. And these issues these days have raised many philosophical questions about what types of individuals would be inspired to commit such horrific acts. Are they influenced by their upbringing and environment to commit evil? Or perhaps is there something at the core of their being that would eventually drive them to commit atrocities against the innocent, regardless of what the eventual stimuli may be in their lives? This leads us to one of the oldest debates about human behavior: nature versus nurture. This argument is used in reference to any number of human behavioral tendencies. For the sake of the topic today, are we the products of an ancestral lineage that helped create us with a propensity toward evil? Or are we influenced by other people and other factors in our environment to learn evil traits? Again, to clarify today's discussion, we are not talking about petty crimes or minor moral dilemmas that many of us may find ourselves in from time to time. We are talking about what could be characterized as truly abhorrent evil. I would have to say that most of the time when I have discussions about this with people, they almost always take the position that evil, for lack of a better term, or hatred, or whatever the case may be, that is totally negative. They usually say that this is learned. And we've all run across these pictures on the internet where you will have multiracial, multi-ethnic babies playing together, toddlers playing together, and they're getting along fine. And the caption underneath says, "We don't start out hating each other. We don't start out this way." And I don't want to tip my hat too much to what my opinion is going to be on this toward the end of the podcast here, but I will say that there's no question that conditioning plays a major part in how this happens. This negative conditioning is most obvious anytime there's a child wearing a hooded sheet or a Nazi uniform. This type of negative conditioning is also present on the tough streets of our most violent cities, where children are often inured to violent behavior and to idolize criminals. There is no question that these children are not getting off to a good start through no fault of their own. However, despite negative odds, many people rise above these types of conditioning and go on to live productive lives. Conversely, many children are raised by loving and caring families, along with well-adjusted siblings in diverse communities, and somehow still manage to end up choosing a dark path in life. Specific prejudices are most certainly learned, and under the right conditions can be untaught, so to speak, through education and guidance. However, I'm not sure that the same applies to an actual bloodthirst or a desire for mass murder. Two examples of people who are often cited as people who were behind some of the most notorious acts of violence in history are Osama bin Laden and Adolf Hitler. In this regard, the histories of both men are worthwhile and interesting topics of discussion. Osama bin Laden was born into a wealthy family with strong connections in Saudi Arabia. He arguably had every opportunity to live a carefree lifestyle and was hardly a victim of an unfair start in life. Nonetheless, somewhere along the line, the rich, quiet child transformed into a religious extremist. As his radical views and actions grew, his family reportedly disowned Osama bin Laden, and the Saudi Arabian government revoked his passport. Hitler's personal religious beliefs are a subject of much conjecture and debate. It is generally presumed that Hitler was a materialist with little spiritual feeling and most likely evoked religion only to legitimize his own interests. Hitler had an estranged relationship with his father, who died when Hitler was a young man. His mother died several years later, and by all accounts, her death was very difficult for Hitler because he was very close to her. Hitler's ideological development most certainly began to resolutely take shape some years later after the First World War. Upon Germany's defeat, Hitler was embittered over the breakdown of the war effort, and he was shocked by Germany's complete capitulation to the terms of the surrender. Both Osama bin Laden and Hitler were skilled communicators, intelligent, and able to amass a large radical following. Unfortunately, their bizarre and malevolent brand of charisma reaches beyond their graves to inspire deep-seated violence and hatred for a present-day generation. It is a plausible assertion that if either man directed his leadership skills toward good deeds, the world might be a better place. But unfortunately, as we all know, that is not the path they took. So why do some people, such as Osama bin Laden and Hitler, actually seem to choose to commit diabolical acts? As the understanding of the human genome has progressed, it seems as though both of the arguments for nature and nurture are partially correct. Nature endows us with certain inborn abilities and traits, and then the nurture aspect takes these genetic tendencies and molds them as we mature. By contrast, the Bible addresses the notion that some people are incorrigibly wicked. Though grace is shown to the wicked, they do not learn righteousness. Even in a land of uprightness, they go on doing evil and regard not the majesty of the Lord. I do not believe that there are positive or negative spirits influencing human behavior. However, I do feel that some people will innately and deliberately turn away from what we might call a natural goodness or morality. Most pets have been conditioned through generations of selective breeding to be genetically predisposed to coexist with human beings. Those with the most friendly and human-like attributes are encouraged to breed. They are also a product of human nurturing, as almost from their birth they are raised by humans who love them and show them affection. However, there are times when a pet, despite the best pedigree and nurturing, is a dangerous threat to human beings and therefore must be destroyed. Is it possible that some people as well are not intrinsically capable of living in a civilized world with other human beings? There is ongoing research as to what other possible causes there may be for violent tendencies and psychopathic behavior. Many have suggested that irregularities in the brain and the limbic system could play significant roles in the development of violent behavior. Any combination of physical or mental abuse is also a major consideration. A more controversial theory from the biological and evolutionary point of view is that the transition of man from beast to the purveyor of civilization is not yet complete. I would agree that humans could very well be influenced by our early animalistic instincts. After all, we are just an advanced species of primates, and we're not the only member of that group to engage in such aspects of, let's say, warfare. However, referring to certain evil humans as animals may be an insult to animals because we have managed to kick things up a notch in terms of the brutality that we inflict on each other. Genocide is a perfect example of a classically unique human endeavor. The same power of intellect that we possess as human beings that gave us the ability to dream of traveling to the moon has also enabled some of us to craft new ways of indulging our desire to inflict pain and suffering onto other people and other living things. In this regard, I sometimes wonder if it is this dark side of our brain power that has allowed us to evolve a barbarity that transcends the natural viciousness of the wild kingdom. Serial killers are prime examples of human beings who not only have an insatiable desire to kill, but also mix their homicidal cravings with a lust for violent deviance. Sociopaths who have no conscience but yet retain the uncanny ability to disguise this disastrous inadequacy by some accounts represent 1 to 4% of our population. I wonder how many of us would take a tour of the most violent and locked down death row wards in various prisons throughout the country. What would scare us the most about that experience? Would it be the fear of violence? Or perhaps would it be that we don't want to face the fact that the people incarcerated there are not necessarily monsters, but are more normal human beings than what we care to admit? Maybe they remind us of our own evil dark side that dwells deep within each of us. The only thing that separates us from impenitent killers is they choose to indulge an aspect of their will that we, as civilized human beings, recognize as the absolute worst traits that humankind has to offer. In my opinion, there has to be something misfiring in the character of what makes them human, that makes their brand of evil beyond rehabilitation. I have heard various accounts over the years from other people, and to some degree, I've experienced this myself. But I have been told about children that were born into a certain family, and you knew from the very beginning, from the time that this child was a toddler, that there was something about this kid that wasn't quite right. And I don't necessarily mean mentally, but there was something about this child that the will, what dwelled inside of them, there was something different. There was something wrong. And by the same token, at the end of life, we so often imagine people when they're dying, they're repentant. They want salvation. They want to make things right with their family and so on. But not everybody dies that way. There are people who have been terminally ill, beat their wives. They're dying and suffering, and with their last gasp of air, they make their children feel inadequate. So to some degree, I believe that some people are just rotten to the core from beginning to end. So to answer this question more directly, are some people born evil? To some degree, I would argue that we are all born evil. However, we are also born with a great capacity to love and care for each other. Those traits have become a valuable part of our intellectual evolutionary process as well. We comprehend and appreciate that it is much harder to create and nurture the fragility of life than it is to destroy it, and that our immense capacity to destroy life could result in the end of our species and possibly the end of all life as we know it. The common desire that we all share as human beings to be loved and respected should extend to all living things and the world that we live in. It is for these reasons that the vast majority of us win our inner struggles to become better people and work toward a better world for everyone. Our love and appreciation for each other is the heartbeat of our humanity. In this way, we as intelligent and civilized human beings have great powers of reason and free will. There is hardly anyone of any age who is not able to recognize the act of murder as an offense against humanity and the laws of a civilized society. I would caution against shifting the blame for the evil that some people do onto other influences in society. I understand that it may be easier for some of us to believe that we are all born just sweet and innocent, rather than to have to struggle with our own still evolving inner demons. That is scary because, frankly, it is a fight that some of us will not win. And eventually, we all need to own up to who and what we are as an individual human being. Ultimately, this is what separates the good people from the evil people. I am Billy Dees, and that is our commentary for today. If you would like to tweet me, you can certainly do so on Twitter, at Billy Dees on Twitter. That's kind of my social media home, and there's links to my other social media in my Twitter bio. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and just about every major podcast platform. And you can also find the Billy Dees Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today, and I will be talking to you again very soon. Well, hello everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees Podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.